any time we look at any aspect of human development or any tool that humanity uses, and we say this one doesn't need any guardrails, I think that's a problem. So,
Yeah.
if you look at the history of economics, money started because it was just simply easier. You reared sheep, your neighbor reared corn. Hey, I'll give you this many sheep for that much corn, right? And you go to town, you need bread, you need shoes. So you go to the cobbler, you go to the baker. Well, you can't be keeping your sheep with you all through town. And, it doesn't work. So shells or coins or what have you, as it developed, became a representation of this is worth this much sheep. You know, 5 coins equals 1 sheep or whatever. So I can make these exchanges in a much easier fashion. And that's how our monetary system developed. It was a great boon, right? It allowed free trade. It allowed more people to focus on the thing that they're good at, while still being able to take advantage of goods and services that others were good at. However, if you say, well, we don't need any guardrails on money, well, we all know where that goes. Right? And of course, the love of money is the root of all evil, all sorts of evils. And so you see this kind of thing when it runs amok. AI can be a helpful tool. It's very, the fact that it's going and translating all these 10,000 cuneiform tablets, most of which are probably not any academically significant. There are probably bills of sale and lading, but there may be one or two in there that unlock something amazing. Now, to have a scholar sit down and try and do that would take so many hours of work. It's just not worthwhile. But if you could set a computer on it, say go, then we'll probably be able to find something amazing that we wouldn't have been able to find before. So AI can do that kind of stuff. But if you say, well, we don't need any guardrails on AI, well, now we're seeing, kids getting in AI.
Suicides.
Yeah, you're getting they're
suicides.
getting counseled by an AI counselor, and it's giving them instructions on how to commit suicide. And you see that problem. Look, CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing. Okay, wow, we can edit out, the sickle cell gene perhaps, or we can edit out some of these other birth defect genes. Well, that's great. But then again, you turn around, you see these New York boutique booths coming in saying, how would you like to choose your child with blue eyes? And that's just disastrous. Not for the least of which is people don't understand that once you select for certain traits, you're actually also selecting against other traits. We've seen this in dogs. I talked with Peg Arby on this, and he was making the comparison to breeding dogs. So, for example, German shepherds, they bred them for that nice sloped back and things like that. Well, the more that they bred them to have that sloped back, the more they found out that they were having terrible hip problems. And every dog breed you look at has some issue. When you're breeding for one selective feature, you're actually taking away other things that may not even have been understood to be related, but they are related because we just don't have all of that capability yet. So when you start selecting for your kid, who's going to want their kid to not be smarter than the next one? Who's going to not want their kid to be maybe a little bit taller? And here's a good question. If you're a couple of some race and you get to choose the race of your child, you get to gene edit basically his melanin levels, whether he's going to be black or white. What do you do? Do you choose for or against that, thinking about his future? All this kind of stuff starts to scare me because you can see that. I'm not saying everybody's going to do that, but you can see a significant number of people will run off the rails. We have the ability to ease people's suffering, right? And then now we get euthanasia laws. And now euthanasia laws isn't for the terminal cancer patient who's in agonizing pain. It's for the lady in Canada who's depressed. It's the 17-year-old kid. And they're trying to ask for euthanasia. It's anytime we have any of these things, it runs off the rails. Everything needs to be very well guarded, very well checked, because our penchant as humans is to take something, no matter whether it's developed for the good, as you say, or for destruction, but to take it and run with it in whatever way we deem fit. And that's what scares me the most.
Yeah. I mean, And of course, the key thing there is that, well, then where do the guardrails get put, and how do we determine where they
Yeah, it
get
used
put?
to
I
be
mean,
that we would all come from us, and this is why I think science did flourish in the Christian West, is because Christianity, by its nature, creates guardrails. For the same reason that the founders of the United States made a series of checks and balances, saying that we understand people are basically evil, and we've got to make sure that each one is not
yeah,
having too much power, right? Checked by somebody else.
right.
Christianity, we used to have a social and cultural ethos that would do that within our religious framework. Now that we're living in a disenchanted world, that doesn't exist anymore. So now your question is really profound. Where does that come from?
Where do the guardrails come from? Who determines them? What by what metric or standard are they determined? And that's where, like, but okay, but this is where, like, I want to be careful, because you could have some not atheist who has some reasons for putting certain guardrails in place. What I'm trying to get at is, it seems to me that, and again, I don't know everything about Thiel, but it seems to me that if I interpret Francis Bacon, and the majority of this article really has to do with Francis Bacon and the project that the authors believe that he sort of set in motion. Noble places it even further back. He goes all the way back to, I think the first guy he mentions is John Scotus Erugena, not Duns Scotus, but the earlier Scotus, like in the 9th century, about man perfecting himself through the mechanical arts, as it was called. That, maybe the way I'm seeing this is almost like a heresy. It's almost like
Yeah.
like there's something heretical about. Jacques Ellul wrote a really great book called The Meaning of the City, where he sees the beginning of technology as in Genesis chapter 4, where Cain builds the first city, right? And I think he names it Enoch. I think Cain's first son is named Enoch.
Yeah, I think so.
And he names the city Enoch. And I think he makes an interesting insight there. He says that along with, like Bonhoeffer thought the conscience came into existence after the fall, because we didn't, once there's the fall and the knowledge of good and evil, then, the conscience sort of would emerge, the conscience, not consciousness. But then Ellul is making this point in the book that technology, as sort of symbolized by the building of the first city, right, is kind of now man's attempt to get back into a place of security, like the garden, but without recourse to God, right? Where the right way to get back into peace and a new nature, a renewed nature, would be to return to the Creator, right? Which obviously, that we get that through Christ eventually. And then, of course, we see in Revelation the city and the garden together, right? The garden in the middle of the city of God. So, but man's city is sort of like where, according to Ellul, like man assembles all of his prowess, all of his still God-given ability, creative ability, to develop the requisite technology he needs to offset all of the consequences of sin, his alienation from the natural world, which is now antagonistic towards us, to include the animals if we take the serpent as a real serpent. His alienation from his spouse, like, from man and woman, the alienation that exists in society, and then his alienation from his own labor, right, from his own work, right? So technology becomes like this means by which to fix all of these problems. And I think it does do that to some degree, right? Even before Francis Bacon, we're making machines, and we're making things that make labor easier, and so on and so forth, and making our work easier. And that are reconciling us in some way to nature, so that nature isn't as scary, isn't as menacing, isn't as threatening to us. And then, Bacon is sort of extending that project now, but now very explicitly doing it without, or maybe not explicitly, but maybe he's doing it again without recourse to Christianity, without recourse to really Christ. So it's kind of like it's like we're trying, technology untethered from a Christian worldview, right? Is this ancient ongoing attempt that we see in the Bible to basically, again, and I've said it a couple times now, reverse the curse, but without recourse to God.
Basically building a tower toward God, as Genesis 11 puts it, right?
It's and like the ongoing project of Babel, I guess.
That's right. And what's scary is that one of the things that happens, and when I read this, it's amazing because God says, because they did this thing, and Nimrod, a mighty hunter. A lot of Bible translation, the mighty hunter before the Lord is kind of more like a mighty hunter in defiance of the Lord. So here's a representative individual who's leading a people, who's doing something that's bucking what God has put before him, and they're going to build something of their own design that stands the test of time. Look, and God says, now whatever they propose to do, it shall not be withheld from them. And you start to say, wow, that sounds cool, but actually that's a curse. That's like God saying, hey, because they're like this, they're never going to be self-governing. There will always be somebody in humanity who tries to push it all the way to the end. And if you let man have his head, he will go to the other extreme. And this is true even with God's people. Read the book of Jeremiah, for crying out loud, how God just continually pleads with them. And only, all you do is wicked. All you do is, I can't believe I saved you. Right? Or the book of Judges. I mean, it's replete throughout the Old Testament that we see this. So this is nothing new. It's just the latest iteration.
It's the same ongoing project as I think what he shows in part in the article over the 400 years in these literary works. But my question is whether or not, again, is he
pro or con?
Is Peter Thiel, as I'm going to entitle the article, Bacon revividus? Is he the new Francis Bacon of our time, trying to construct the utopian technocratic society, but without recourse? Is he carrying on in this, what is some might call a sort of a Christian heresy?
Right.
In trying to use technology to redeem ourselves, right? Would be one way of putting it. I mean, there is a weird way where we can see all of human history through the lens of technology and the things that we've developed, right?
Yeah.
Because and let me pull this up, because when we get to the conclusion of this article, and again, this is First Things. It's a Christian magazine. It's a very conservative Christian magazine. And I'm like, I was like, well, what's the conclusion here going to be? Is it going to be like sort of a conclusion on how we should use technology, or some guidelines or rails for our development and use of technology? But it wasn't really anything like that. And I'll just read this last paragraph because I'm scratching my head on what is being sort of alluded to or hinted at here. He says, quote, "For philosophy, the question, one world or none, has but one answer: better read than dead." End quote. Now, what he means there is, philosophically speaking, if you had the choice between living under the, Big Brother, the rule of Big Brother, who has the technology to basically just control society down to its most minute detail, you would, I guess, still opt for that. Better to exist even under a antichrist sort of state, right, that controls you, than to not exist. Well, I don't know if that's true, but he seems to say, for philosophy, better to exist under the totalitarian technocratic state than to not exist at all.
Yeah, again, I'm pulled by that sentence because I'm not sure if he's saying kind of secular philosophy, the philosophy of the day. That question would be, of course, we should be in one world as opposed to none world. Because then he goes on to say, theology reformulates the question, Antichrist or Armageddon. Neither the Christian replies. He prays for new miracles, new technologies, and strange new possibilities. Again, I'm fuzzy on where what he's actually trying to say. So I can't say that he's landing in any camp. He is definitely, obviously, someone who's not technophobic. He's an innovator. He's a person who's pushing technology to new approaches. I don't know, but again, the question that keeps coming back is, but where are the guardrails? Who says how far and not farther? And how do we even police that? I mean,
this line here of, okay, theology reformulates the question, and then he says he points that out as like a false dichotomy. Oh, right. It's neither that we have to usher it, bow down to the Antichrist, or that we have to wage war against a purported Antichrist. But then the only thing he says is the Christian prays for new miracles, new technologies, and strange new possibilities. Well, forget the strange new possibilities, because who knows what that means. But we know what miracles are, and we know what technologies are. And after reading the article, I'm thinking, like, really all the Christian in this article is praying for is new technologies. I think the miracles is thrown in there. But, this would not concern me so much if it was like, somebody like me writing this. But this is a guy who is really amongst the elite in global economic, political, and technological society. He's got his fingers on a lot of levers, right? And so I'm like, I just kind of wanted a little bit more of like something about guardrails.
Well, and I think his
not there.
I think his assumption on Christianity is wrong as well. I think what the historic position of the church has always been Maranatha, come quickly, Lord Jesus. Yes, cause Armageddon, put nature back in its proper order. Yes, conquer the evil, conquer the darkness. In Revelation chapter 6, the saints are under the altar praying, how long, O Lord, until you avenge us of our blood, right? I mean, over and over again, when we read this, it's not, don't let Armageddon happen. It's no, take the power of the prince of this world out and rightfully reclaim your throne. And that's what Armageddon should be understood as. Armageddon isn't, a bad thing from a Christian perspective. It's a reconquering of what was been purchased by Christ's blood. And that's the part that I don't hear in any of this. And that's why it concerns me.
Well, and that's where too, like, I don't know where this idea is coming from, that we need to build a certain technology in order to wage war against a technological antichrist. Like, that is a very weird idea.
Yeah.
Like, that we got to build, and this is like, I think Elon Musk has said something like this, about we have to build the technology in order to defend ourselves against the technology or something that's coming or something like that. And that doesn't make any, we have to, I don't know if it's the Neuralink, or we have to implant the Neuralink chip in our minds so that we don't become part of the sort of singularity. So, and I think there was an interview with Ross Douthat, Peter Thiel did. Ross Douthat, the writer for the New York Times columnist. I think we'll have to look this up, where Douthat says, how do you know that you're not the Antichrist, or something like that? Kind of challenging. Like, how do you know that you're not the one ushering in with the technologies that you're pursuing, Antichrist? And I can't remember his answer to that, but again, I don't know how to evaluate First Things running this article, because again, I mean, First Things is it's a very conservative, sort of highbrow Christian publication, right? Catholics mainly, right? But evangelicals. And there's nothing in here about ethical boundaries on tech. It's just he prays for new miracles, new technologies, and strange new possibilities. I mean, is that what Christians pray for? I thought we would pray for, as you said, we would pray for Jesus to
Yeah,
come.
exactly.
But so, anyways, interesting. I might have to write Rusty Reno a letter to the editor on this one, especially given some of the other things that Thiel has said in some of his other interviews, because this just wasn't a very satisfying or encouraging conclusion in my view.